The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.
In just one operation last October, police charged 107 people in Ontario for exploiting children online. 107. Tonight, what on earth is going on and how to keep kids safe? Also, with winter weather well and truly upon us, some road safety tips from a local police constable who's also something of a TikTok star. And we'll find out why a recent court decision in Waterloo region could have far-reaching consequences for homeless encampments province-wide. It's Monday, February 6th, and that's next on the agenda. Never have there been more kids online, often unaccompanied, than over the past few years. Tragically, that's led to some terrible new means for young people to be targeted and exploited by predators on now ubiquitous social media platforms. Late last year, for instance, hundreds of charges were laid in an investigation known as Project Maverick, conducted by 27 different police services across Ontario. With us now for more, in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Leanna MacDonald, Executive Director of the Canadian Centre for Child Protection. And back here in our studio, Detective Michael Sabadin with the Toronto Police Service's Internet Child Exploitation Section, and Nora Constas, President and CEO at Boost Child and Youth Advocacy. Very happy to have you two with us here in our studio. And Leanna MacDonald, thanks for joining us from Winnipeg, Manitoba, where I gather it was a balmy minus 40 on the weekend. My goodness. Okay. Glad you did not freeze and glad you are with us. Let's start our conversation with just some facts. Sheldon, can we have you bring up this graphic here? Cybertip.ca, which is Canada's national tip line for reporting the online sexual exploitation of children, saw a 106% increase in reports between the spring of 2020 and the spring of 2021. 106% increase. In 2021, the tip line processed a total of almost 21,000 reports. Ontario was the jurisdiction of origin for almost 6,000 of those reports, making it, not surprisingly, the province with the largest number of reports in Canada. Okay, Leanna, let's get to this. Why are we seeing increases in cyber crimes targeting youth in Ontario and across Canada, in your view?
Well, I think there are a couple of reasons, Steve. We're really in the perfect storm right now. When you look at the epidemic of COVID, kids spending more time online, isolated. You also have access to platforms where we see adults having free access to children within those environments. And also you have, child development. You have kids who are exploring their own sexuality. They're, spending time online. And we have very sophisticated networks of individuals who commit crimes against children. So basically, it really should not be a surprise to us. And then on top of it, what we have is an unregulated internet.
All right, Nora, can I get you to follow up on the COVID angle? How much has COVID been responsible for the uptick that we've seen?
I think COVID has complicated and increased the risk for a number of reasons. Before COVID, children had multiple outlets or opportunities to socialize. They had friends that they could go out with and hang out with, but we had to put an end to that during COVID. And so children were isolated and quite literally left to their own devices, which resulted in them starting to, experiment much more online and probably engage in riskier behavior without perhaps gaining a full appreciation for the potential consequences. So when you have inabilities to engage socially or in person, they're trying to maintain that social engagement or interaction online using different platforms.
It's another unhealthy byproduct of COVID that perhaps some people didn't consider.
Yes, it is.
Okay, Michael, lots of terms here that we need some clarification around. For example, the offense of self-exploitation. What is that?
Yeah, so essentially self-exploitation is we are having kids as young as 4 years old. They are on their electronics and they're on certain social media platforms. And as Leanna said, sometimes it could be that they're experimenting with themselves, or they inadvertently post images or videos of themselves online.
There are 4-year-olds with their own iPhones?
iPhones, their own accounts, their own email accounts. They are very knowledgeable and very advanced to what you would think a 4-year-old would know about the internet and devices.
Do you have any advice to parents on the advisability of getting their 4-year-old an iPhone and an Instagram account to boot?
I would not recommend it. And those that do have access to devices, I would recommend overseeing them quite a bit.
Okay, Leanna, another expression here, sextortion. What is that?
Basically, it's blackmail. What we're seeing is kids who are being targeted, they're being coerced or tricked into giving a sexual image of themselves, typically is what's happening, or video. What we know is we've got very sophisticated organized crime networks that are making a lot of money in this capacity, and we have kids who are completely being duped. They think a young boy might think they're talking to a pretty girl, and basically within a short time frame, they're exchanging images. What happens very, very quickly is it turns to demands for money. And many of these organized groups are outside of North America, so it makes it incredibly complicated for law enforcement efforts. But more importantly, these kids don't stand a chance. And so it's really, really concerning. And since July alone, we've had 1,700 reports come into us about sextortion.
Oh, I got more on this. Hang on. We have a lot more facts to introduce to the record here. Stats gathered by the Canadian Centre for Child Protection about the increase in youth being sextorted, as the term goes. These numbers gathered between July 2022 and January 2023, so 6-month period. Cybertip.ca currently receives an average of 70 sextortion reports per week. The National Tip Line received more than 1,700 sextortion reports in total. 91% of sextortion victims are male. Typically, boys are extorted for money, girls are extorted for images. Sextortion demands for money often come from international organized criminal networks, as Leanna was telling us. 79% of sextortion incidents occurred on Instagram or Snapchat. Okay, Nora, we need some advice here. If you find yourself the victim of a sextortion attempt, what do you do?
I think the most important thing is ensuring that they have a trusted individual that they could speak to. And I think one of our biggest efforts is to really remove the shame and blame that's associated with making mistakes. These are children and youth who are, as Leanne mentioned, experimenting. And they're experimenting in areas, in non-traditional areas. And the internet being what it is and being unregulated, it creates a whole other level of risk. So I think what we need to do is really focus on providing caregivers, parents, teachers, the tools they need to be able to engage in these conversations, to be able to identify these situations and proactively engage with children and youth on some of the risks and dangers associated with it.
And can we assume insulting your child or giving your child hell or something like that is not the way to go?
It is absolutely not. The prohibitive approach actually creates more of a barrier, and it really reduces the ability for the child to begin that trusting relationship with the adult.
Michael, we mentioned off the top there were more than 24 police services across Ontario that were involved in one particular operation. And just curious, how do that many services work together, keep the thing under wraps so that the word doesn't get out, and cooperate effectively to make arrests?
Well, we have what we call the provincial strategy, and all the agencies work together to combat these offenses and identify and rescue children. We all work very well together because we're very passionate about the job that we do. And it's just something that's been ongoing for many years, and it grows and grows, and hopefully we can get more agencies involved.
Again, do police officers, I mean, this is very, very, I mean, this is just awful, right? This is disgraceful, this kind of thing.
Yeah.
Do police officers actually want to work in this field, or would they prefer something else?
I would say that the majority of the officers that are in this field want to be in this field. I don't think it's a field that you could be in if you weren't invested into it. As we were talking earlier today, I mean, that's one of the main questions. How do you do this job? And for me, I get to go to work every morning knowing that I have a chance to rescue a child. So that's, I think, what motivates all of us.
Gotcha. Okay, let's follow up on that. And again, I'm going to ask our director, Sheldon Osmond, if you would, to bring up a graphic here outlining some more on what Michael Sabatin was just talking about. Project Maverick, conducted October 2022 as part of the provincial strategy just mentioned to protect children from sexual abuse and exploitation on the internet. Ontario Provincial Police collaborated with 27 policing partners, including Toronto Police, to address these cyber crimes. In October of last year alone, provincial strategy policing agencies identified 61 victims, conducted 255 investigations, executed 168 warrants, seized more than 1,000 electronic devices, arrested 107 people, laid 428 charges, safeguarded 60 children. Okay, Michael, how many investigations related to child abuse or exploitation did your squad conduct last year?
Last year, we were roughly around 2,000 occurrences for Toronto.
And what was the after effect of all of that?
The after effect is as far as arrests and whatnot?
Yeah.
We had about 70 arrests, just over 70 arrests.
And where are those arrests currently in the justice system pipeline?
That I couldn't tell you individually. A lot of them are currently before the courts still.
Are some of the people who have been arrested in jail?
There are some, yes.
But most are not?
There's a lot that have been released, yes.
Do we infer from that they may be back to their nefarious activities?
I can't speak about that. I mean, our job is to conduct our investigations and put them before the courts and hope that the courts do their job. We have seen repeat offenders, of course. I'm not going to say it doesn't happen, but I hope that the court process works and it doesn't happen.
Nora, you work with Toronto Police, right?
Yes, we
Your
do.
organization does? Okay. What kind of supports are you and they provided with?
So one of the services that we provide at Boost is court support for children and youth who are victims of crime. And the court support provides education right through the entire process, from the beginning to even after the verdict has come down. So in the event of an acquittal, there are conversations around how to best manage, provide the children, youth, and the caregivers the supports they need to be able to move on from these traumas and incidents.
Leanna, you were telling us earlier that a lot of this is organized by international organizations operating on Canadian soil. Is there anything that can be done to protect children from these international influences?
I'm really glad you asked that, Stephen. I did want to jump in on a couple of points.
Sure.
I think we really need to understand, in terms of these sextortion cases that we are seeing, the level of depravity and seriousness of them. We are having a number of kids who take their own lives, who die by suicide because they're basically being terrorized within hours. Just around a year ago, we had a boy, a 17-year-old boy named Daniel Lintz, who took his own life. I was on the phone with his mom last week and talking to her and another mother whose son died by suicide, and technology facilitated what unfolded. Is that these kids, in many cases, they really are panicked and they don't stand a chance. So it's within hours, and we're talking a guerrilla-like terrorism. These people are threatening their families. They're going to kill them. They're going to send out the material to all of their contacts. It is really, really horrific. And so I think one of the messages from Daniel's mom was like, you know, Leanna, this wasn't about me not being a good parent. Like, this wasn't about me not talking to my son about being safe online. And so I think it's really complicated because, yes, of course, parents are going to be essential in education and that front line of helping their children. But we also have to recognize that we've put children in a very compromised position where we can have organized crime networks actually targeting our Canadian children. And so there's a couple of things that certainly we talk about. We talk about the need for sort of international joint efforts by the policing community. And I'm happy to say that there is that going on, that we are sort of identifying these organized networks. Absolutely critical that there's an enforcement role there. We also know that parents have to be really vigilant in talking to the kids about the seriousness of these types of risks to them, so that they know that what they might be experiencing isn't in fact true. So there's a lot of course things that we do need to arm parents with. But I also think that it's super necessary that, again, this broader conversation about how is it that Canadian children can be targeted in this way. So we are certainly embracing the government of Canada's steps forward to regulate the internet. We need to have that unfold right now. So these are the sorts of things that we're certainly promoting on our end.
Okay, thanks, Leanna. I'll give you a second here to get your earpiece fixed there. And then, Nora, let me follow up with you. I mean, I know a lot of parents who don't even have the passwords of their teenagers' cell phones or iPhones. You know, how are parents supposed to have a positive influence on their kids' lives in this regard if they don't even have that?
So I think what you want to do is establish that trust. That is the most critical piece. Sometimes, you know, it's not going to start with the free flowing of information to say, here, Mom, here's my password, please have your way with my phone. It's also to remove some of the, and I sort of touched on this earlier, remove that blame and shame. Have the conversations around this is a real risk. This is, and there are very far-reaching consequences associated with it. But we need to have that dialogue, and we need to establish that trusting sort of bilateral reciprocal relationship to say, I'm here to support you regardless of what's happened. And if it has happened, then we do need to report it, because ultimately this is a crime. And children need to understand that, and that's going to be effective when there is consistent messaging from parents, from caregivers, from the school system, and perhaps even higher from government.
Michael, I want to circle back to the Project Maverick incident that we were talking about, the effort undertaken by all of those different police services to make some headway against this. We did a program on last week on the so-called, I guess what the federal conservatives are calling the catch and release bail system that they believe we have in this country right now. And I wonder, give us some insight here. How frustrated are cops when they do work, they arrest somebody, the person goes into the system, and 2 hours later they're back out on the street?
It is frustrating, but again, all that we can do is do the best investigations that we can and provide the best support we can for the victims of these crimes, and then get it before the courts. And then from then it's up to the courts. I think it's important for the lawmakers and, you know, the persons in power that are speaking for our communities to be involved to further those discussions.
Do you know whether, and again, I'm not taking a political position on this, I'm just inquiring here, if somebody does go before the court, they are arrested, they are released on their own recognizance, or they get bail, they go out, are there any limitations, for example, placed on their internet use as part of the conditions of their bail?
Again, that's a very general question. Generally, there is, but again, that's up to the courts to decide what the conditions are that are placed on certain individuals. It's very fluid, depending on the situation, depending on the person, and whatnot. So again, once it gets to the court system, we have very limited say into what happens there.
Well, but if somebody's busted and they're released on their own recognizance and they're forced to, whatever, stay home, stay off the internet, are you as a police officer allowed to kind of knock on their door and say, just inquiring, just checking to make sure you're not going online and creating more mischief?
Generally not, no.
Should you have that authority?
Again, that would be something that I can't decide.
You're being very careful here.
Yeah.
I get it. Okay. Nora, should the courts be tougher in granting bail to criminals who have been charged with sexual exploitation of youth on the internet?
I think there needs to be greater understanding of the potential impacts on the lives of children and youth who are victims. I think, you know, any verdict that comes out one way or the other will have implications. And Leanna touched on it again, the risk of suicide and potential self-harm that goes with some of these outcomes is not an area that should go unnoticed or should go unrecognized. And one of the things we really do with our organization is provide these children and youth with the support systems and the tools they need to be able to move forward and become productive members of society and work through the trauma and everything that they've experienced as a result of this.
Just give me your gut instinct here. Do you think the justice system is adequately seized of this issue in a way that will put the bad people away and give the young people a shot at coming back?
I think the focus should be on more of a multidisciplinary approach. So recognizing that it's not just the judicial system, that there is the education system that needs to come into play, that there is the healthcare system that needs to come into play. And it's not just about one player. It's all of us actually coming to the table, dropping those silos and working together to ensure the best outcomes for these children and youth.
Gotcha. Leanna, your organization's got something called Project Arachnid. What is that?
So basically, Project Arachnid is a platform that allows our organization to detect known child sexual abuse material. What happens is when Project Arachnid comes across it, we issue automated notices to providers to have that material removed. And Steve, if you can believe it, we issue between 20 and 30,000 notices a day.
20 to 30,000 a day. Okay, and how effective are the hosting companies? And how quickly will they act, in other words, in a timely manner, to take this stuff down once you've identified it for them?
Well, it all depends. So we have many of the providers who respond immediately when we send notices, and I think as we're getting our strength in what Arachnid can do, and our transparency in terms of our public reporting about who are the bad actors, who are the ones who are complying, it's making a significant difference. Today, we just had a piece out of the New York Times on Twitter, and some of the delays we were seeing with notices and removal times, a very clear-cut CSAM that needed to come down. So it really, really does depend. But for the most part, we have that. The problem is we do have bad actors. And again, we run into jurisdictional challenges in terms of how companies have to respond. And I think that it raises, the larger question of the role of technology in the facilitation of child abuse.
And let me just do one more follow-up here, which is to say, okay, you pointed out to a hosting company, they take the image down. What's to prevent the bad actors from, uploading it again 15 minutes later?
Excellent question. And so this is one of the biggest things that our organization is doing right now. Right now, there is no reason why companies should be possessing or hosting any known child sexual abuse material. So Project Arachnid has a free sort of tool that allows companies to proactively stop the re-upload of child sexual abuse material. So the problem is, well, they don't have to use it. So as we're moving forward towards a regulatory framework, that is not only a question we're kind of raising to the Canadian government. Companies should have to use these types of tools, but internationally as well. There's no reason whatsoever that known images of child sexual abuse material should be on the clear internet.
And I let you get away with using an acronym a moment ago, and I should have asked you what it stood for right away. You said CSAM, which stands for what?
Sorry, child sexual abuse material.
There we go.
Or under Canadian law, child pornography, but we do not use the term.
Gotcha. Okay, Michael, back to you. The dark web, which I don't even know how to use. I'm sure you guys do. I don't know how you find it, but anyway, I hear about it all the time. Yeah. How influential is it in all of this activity?
We are aware of it. Obviously, it is a part of what we do, but even more alarming is what is on the ClearNet, the availability and the access to materials and children on the ClearNet. So the dark web, we are aware of it, it's available, but it's even more alarming what's happening right in front of us in the ClearNet.
Okay, let me do a quick follow on this. Does everybody know how to find the dark web and I'm just an idiot, or what's the story here?
I don't think everybody knows how to find it, no.
I'm not suggesting you give people advice on how to find it, but is it ubiquitous?
No, if you know where you're looking, it can be pretty easy to get a hold of.
Should I just leave this alone?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to leave this alone. Okay, Leanna, back to you. The feds are apparently working on a bill right now tackling online harmful content. Last spring, I think you served on an advisory panel of experts to help guide what should and should not be included in that bill. And one of the topics that you were tasked with sort of tackling is whether this bill should be able to force services to remove harmful content. When it comes specifically to child sexual exploitation content, do you think there is a consensus among experts on how to proceed?
Oh, that was my sense. I mean, when you're talking to a group of experts about the significant harm tied to child sexual abuse material and what that does, both for the survivor and for the society at large, everybody was very clear about that. I think where the challenges lie for us is there's a number of other pieces of material that we would call as very harmful that ought to be included. So we will see, and again, a bit graphic, I'll be careful here, but we would see pictures of children being violently physically abused. So of course we know that's a criminal offense, but the recording of it occurs. That recording then ends up online and you'll see toddlers being beat up. Those videos and those images should not be allowed to be reviewed over and over and over again. We'll see pictures of kids being tied up. Those are not the types of material that should be allowed online. So the problem is with removal is typically we are using the threshold of criminal law. And certainly we need criminal law to put bad people in jail, but we don't need criminal law as the threshold for removal. So right now, when we look at, well, how does this work? Really, the industry has the keys. It's their moderators who actually get to decide what goes up and what comes down. So our organization has put together sort of a blueprint that maps out the types of harms that we are seeing, where you see children's faces completely visible and some wrong is being done to them and they have no privacy rights, they have no protection, and over again this material just goes around the internet. So we're putting sort of we're taking a very strong stance on that with clear-cut examples of how governments, not only in Canada but around the world, absolutely need to do more for children.
Have the feds told you when we're going to see a bill?
No.
So stand by is the advice at the moment.
Yes.
Got it. Okay. Nora, what do you hope to see if and when this bill comes forward?
I think one of the most important things is recognition of what harmful material is. And as Leanna mentioned, it's not just the pornographic images, and it is the full exposure and the privacy challenges that these children face. They are exposed completely, their faces, parts of their bodies. It becomes so important that social media or companies recognize that it's not just about a crime being committed, it's about the potential implications long-term for that child, youth, and or family.
Can I ask you the bigger overarching question here, which is, I mean, all of what you're engaged in right now, all three of you, is trying to stop something that's basically already happened. And presumably, this stuff would not be created in the amount that it is if there weren't a market or a demand for it in the first place. Have you got any thoughts about how we stop or reduce the demand for this kind of material to begin with?
I think, you know, there's bad people out there, and you can't change that. I think what we can change is really taking a much more proactive approach in teaching our children and youth about what is right and what is wrong and what are some of the risks. I think we've got a generation who thought that because it's all online or because it's behind a camera and it's sent to one person, that it doesn't have the potential to go viral or it doesn't have the potential to be leaked elsewhere. It's really providing them the education they need to be able to understand what are some of the potential consequences of those actions.
Michael, can you follow up on that? People watching this right now or listening to it would certainly want some advice from law enforcement on how not to be victimized by this kind of thing. What would you say?
Yeah, I would say much as what Nora and we were talking about earlier is open communication with your children. Be that trusted parent that they can come to. From an early age, have limitations and guidelines into using electronics and the internet, restricting access in certain areas, such as kids taking their devices to the bathroom where they're going to be alone and on them speaking to who knows who. And again, to add to the problem of stopping this from happening, I think one of the biggest things is access. We've got to prevent and slow down the access of this. I could go on to an application right now, and I could probably find some CSAM for you. It's that easy. So if it's that easy for me, these kids are on these applications all day and every day, right? It's just we got to stop the access, especially for the kids that are getting into it nowadays.
How hard is that to do?
I think it's pretty hard.
Pretty difficult.
Nowadays, yeah.
Okay, Leanna, can I get you to weigh in on that as well?
Oh, you sure can. I mean, I think that there's a couple major things that are really, really important to talk about. The role of technology and in facilitating the propagation of this material has created a nightmare. So the fact, like we were talking about earlier, that this should not even be allowed to be on the internet. So we really need to move towards regulation, and we need to make sure that companies must do everything they're told to stop this from happening, to prevent the re-victimization of these survivors and victims. I think the normalization and the commodification of children as sexual objects has become a significant problem online. We see the communication in the dark web daily. I can go on the dark web right now and find communication all about individuals' problematic sexual interest in children. So what we're doing is we're creating an environment where we're normalizing such behavior, and those people who might need some help are starting to connect with others, communities who are normalizing this type of material. I also think it's really important that we kind of look at very young children who are being sexually abused by someone they know. That is being recorded and distributed online. That has nothing to do with internet safety. Of course, it has to do with schools' engagement and different types of personal safety education. But we have one problem, and then we have, again, teens experimenting, where they are, again, being teenagers. They, make, let's say, an error in judgment, or somebody sort of abuses that trust, and we end up with a whole different set of problems. So it really is sort of a very unfair place that we've positioned children, because they really don't have any rights. And so we are kind of stuck in this spot right now until we figure out a couple of foundational flaws here that we have tied to technology. We're going to continue to have kids being victimized. Kids cannot compete with adults. And so we really need to take a hard look as to what are the remedies we can put in place today to stop victims of tomorrow.
Understood. I want to thank the three of you for coming into TVO tonight and joining us from Winnipeg, Manitoba, as Leanna MacDonald from the Canadian Centre for Child Protection has, and sharing your insights. Leanna out of town, Nora Constas from Boost Child and Youth Advocacy, and Michael Sabadin, detective with Toronto Police Service's Internet Child Exploitation Section. Thanks so much for sharing your knowledge with us here tonight on TVO.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It is the dead of winter. The roads can be slushy, icy, or just plain impassable, with whiteouts and drifts of uncleared snow. But we're Canadian, so we know how to drive in such weather, right? Not so fast. Constable Sean Shapiro of the Toronto Police Service, known to more than 500,000 TikTok users as the face of @Traffic Services, sees signs all over the place that Ontario drivers could use a few pointers. And he's here in our studio to share some of those. Nice to meet you finally.
Nice to meet you too.
You're a bit of a big star. I guess you know that.
I've heard rumors.
Okay, let's start with this. We're Canadian. We should know how to drive in the winter. Do we, in fact, demonstrate on a daily basis that we take added precaution in the winter because we know it's dangerous?
There's a lot of people who are fantastic drivers, and there's a lot of people who think they are fantastic drivers, and there's a big divide between them. We tend not to drive appropriately for the weather conditions. We don't slow down. We don't give ourselves that extra time we need to be safe, and that causes a lot of problems on the road.
What do you see more than anything else?
There's an overconfidence with four-wheel drive vehicles, all-wheel drive vehicles, where people think they can just get up and go and they're impervious to the elements because of it. We got news for them. Four-wheel slide when you're trying to brake just as well as two-wheel drive vehicles, and that's a major thing. When it is snowing outside, I always find it amazing in this town. Half an inch of snow and people forget everything. They forget how to drive.
What should they do even before they get into the car to prepare themselves for a little bit of sprinkle?
Well, aside from the fact they should be making sure that their vehicle is in good shape, you know, that all the snow is cleared, their windows are clear, that's a huge problem. They should be ready to go. They should be confident that they're safe to drive. Whether it's be that they've arrested, that they're not impaired by anything, and they should know where they're going. Being totally reliant on a GPS is dangerous. Not being ready, having at very least a basic understanding of where they're going, could get them into problems. Last minute lane changes, last minute turns, those are things that don't mix well with slippery weather.
Salt, shovel in the car, necessary?
Well, I actually have a list of things that you should always keep in the car, especially in the winter. And I'll look at that right now. It's a cell phone and charger. People forget that batteries go dead. And if you have a cell phone charger or a battery backup that's independent of the vehicle, even better, because you can take it with you when you go to get warm somewhere else. A blanket, extra warm clothes, food and water. Water obviously will freeze in the winter, but having something there is better than not having it at all. But flashlights, batteries, first aid kits, jumper cables, road salt and kitty litter is a good suggestion.
Kitty litter?
Something that you can put under the tires to get traction.
Right.
And you'll take what you can get. If you can get salt, that's great. But having even a small amount of it is better than not having it. And then just your obvious stuff of ice scrapers and snow brushes. Incredibly important. Matches and a candle. If you can't create heat anywhere and you're stuck for a long period of time, these are things that can keep you warm.
What percentage of drivers, based on your experience, would you say come with those, what do you got there, 13 items in their cars?
I would say 99% don't.
99% don't.
I am guesstimating, but the truth is I don't even carry all of these things in my car because I live in the city of Toronto, and I find that where I'm going, I'm not generally going to need all of these things. But it's best practices to have it, and if you can do it, great. I've got friends who are really diligent, and they have all this and more. You know, they drive all the time with boots that are capable of keeping them warm when they're digging through. They have a change of clothes in case they're out trying to dig their cars out of a ditch, and they get wet. And then they're still waiting for help. And you hear about people who are waiting for a long time for roadside assistance.
That's really planning ahead. That's impressive. If you have an electric vehicle, should that list look any different?
Not really. Electric vehicles, something that many people don't understand is that their charges and range aren't what they could be in the summertime. Batteries don't tend to last as long in the cold. So you may have actually more cause to use these. But the good thing with the electric vehicles is they can run heaters until the battery dies.
Should you use your cruise control in the winter?
Cruise control is a funny thing. Older cars especially, you shouldn't, because they don't generally have the ability to sense the slippery nature of the road. And you could actually find yourself losing control because of the cruise control. So it would be suggested you don't use cruise control.
Ever in the winter?
Not in the winter. Modern cars have traction control and all sorts of other sensors working to help you. But at the end of the day, being someone who drives to the conditions, so slowing down, driving appropriately, and staying focused on driving, nothing else, that's going to be the best thing for you.
When I took my driving test 120 years ago, they told me that when you go into a skid, turn in the direction of the skid. Is that still the best advice?
Look where you want to go, and that's where you want to steer. Looking and steering into the skid could actually cause you to spin. So it really depends. The best advice that I can give is if you're slowing down, giving yourself all sorts of space, you're going to avoid the skid. And that's what you want to do. Once you're in the skid, very often, it's too late.
If you're on the road and there's a snowplow in front of you, and you're in a hurry because everybody is, what do?
You don't pass it. Regardless of whether or not you can legally pass it, which is a question, it's dangerous. The road ahead is unplowed, potentially unsalted, and incredibly slippery, not to mention the fact that there are large grooves in the snow. If you manage to get by and don't cause a collision, which you're likely going to, but you would want to stay behind patiently for the nice, smooth surface that they're creating, which is the whole reason they're out there. They're there for your safety. So stay away from them. They're big trucks. They need lots of room to operate. And we hear stories all the time about the large blades that they carry for clearing the snow, coming into contact with cars that are trying to pass it, and then those cars end up being damaged and thrown out of the way. You could be charged for careless driving if you do pass it and it's an unsafe maneuver, so just don't risk it.
Generally speaking, are police officers more on the lookout in the winter for bad driving than they would be in the summer?
I'd say it's no change. We're always looking for people who are looking to make the roads unsafe with their behavior. So whether it's dry and they're going faster, or they're going slower but still being unsafe, we're looking out for that. We have a Vision Zero enforcement team that's out all the time, and they're looking for those who choose to speed, drive aggressively, drive distracted, or drive impaired, and that's regardless of the season.
How about pedestrians? They obviously should be taking extra special caution during the wintertime, yes?
Absolutely. If we're seeing issues with drivers, and then you add the fact that pedestrians are out there, it's just more mix. And we always have pedestrians. We are a city with people everywhere, and it's great. But we very often have pedestrians who assume the car is going to do the right thing or be able to stop, and assuming is very dangerous. They step out onto the road potentially before making eye contact with the driver or waiting for the vehicle to come to a complete stop. It's incredible how much movement we can get of a vehicle that is not actually stopped. And it breaks free of traction and continues to slide through an intersection. If you're a pedestrian who assumed they were going to stop, that might be you getting hit.
Just yesterday, I was driving in downtown Toronto. You get these stories all the time. I'm sorry. I'm going to add another one to your repertoire. Driving in downtown Toronto, the light turns red. I'm about to make a right-hand turn. Young woman, face in her device, walks right into the pedestrian intersection. And thankfully, I hit the brakes in time, but she just did not take any care or caution at all that if there was a collision between 3 tons of car and her, she was going to lose.
There's a big problem. Pedestrians have a belief that they have the right of way, and that based on that, they can do whatever they want. And there are a lot of safety-minded pedestrians, and a lot of the ones that you've described face into their phone and assuming everyone will save them. They have to take responsibility for their own safety. And drivers have to be paying attention, focused at the task at hand, safely operating their vehicles. Pedestrians have to do the same thing.
Are there conditions under which you recommend absolutely no driving, it's too bad, and if there are, what does that look like?
If there's zero visibility, if the ice and snow and accumulation is just, it's unlikely that you're going to get to where you're going, then why bother? It has to be an emergency. And even then, a true emergency, call 911, have the paramedics, police, fire. They're the ones that will brave the elements if they have to. But, only you can decide what's worth it for you. We don't tell people they have to stay home unless there's an order like that, and that's very rare. So if you believe and you have the appropriate vehicle and you can make it to where you have to go safely, and it's really that important, then you have to make that decision. But very often we have people who are not used to driving in the weather or not capable of driving. They don't even like it. They're stressed out from it. That's if you yourself have anxiety about getting on the road that day, it's probably an indication you shouldn't be driving that day.
In our last 10 seconds, you ever been in a car accident?
I have, yes, and very recently. I was rear-ended on the Don Valley Parkway a few weeks ago.
Oh, so that's not your fault if you're rear-ended.
True, and fortunately no injuries and no damage to my vehicle, but I have been, and I was in a collision on a police motorcycle a number of years ago, which took me off the road. Someone wasn't paying attention, and that was on dry road. I was on a motorcycle. It took me out of the game. So I'm very, very concerned about traffic safety, and collisions are not fun.
That's the voiceover cop at Traffic Services, Sean Shapiro. Thanks so much for coming into TVO tonight and helping us out with this.
My pleasure.
Encampments for those without housing became more widespread and visible in many parts of Ontario over the course of the pandemic. Municipalities have approached that in various ways. In Waterloo recently, a court ruling against the region on whether it could clear an encampment set precedent that could ripple across the province. With us now to explain, Seema Atri. She is a human rights and constitutional lawyer at the Community Justice Collective. And we're grateful to have you with us tonight here on TVO. Can you tell me just off the top, the Community Justice Collective is what?
We provide free legal support for communities who are organizing around different political issues. We've done a lot of work with people in encampments.
Okay, tell us whether a municipality actually needs a court order to begin with in order to break up an encampment.
Sure. Before I answer your question, let me give you a little bit of context around why people are ending up in encampments in cities across Ontario and what it actually looks like to be in those encampments. I want to share that first, there's no housing available for people right now, and that's why people are ending up outside.
That's the point the judge made in his decision.
That's exactly the point.
If there's no space available or accessible, then you can't break up an encampment.
Exactly. So John Tory will speak a lot about how there's support services for people to enter housing, but that housing just doesn't exist. There's also just no safe shelter options. So even if people can end up in shelters, those shelters are often very dangerous and are leading people to either choose not to go for their own safety or just not be able to access those shelter spots in the first place. And then people end up outside in the encampments where they face constant harassment by police and bylaw officers. Honestly, there's just nowhere to exist right now for people who are unhoused in cities across Ontario. You're kicked out of the parks, you're kicked out of buses, you're kicked out of shelters, and many of these actions are violating people's rights, so we end up in court.
Okay, if you're going to put that on the record, I got to push back a little bit and say, you know, from the point of view of others, and look, no one wants to live in these kinds of circumstances. Let's put that on the record right away. But from the point of view of other citizens, it sure looks like these encampments are allowed to exist a lot longer than makes sense for public safety all round. Is that not fair to say?
I'd push back and say, where do people want people to live? If there is an indoor shelter space and there aren't affordable housing options for people, people are forced to live outside. They aren't making this choice. This is, at this point, the safest option for people. And so if we want to address this, we need to actually address the problem of housing and the lack of indoor housing, which is what I think this court
for sure
is trying.
That's the long-term solution here, obviously. But in the short term, let's go back to my first question. Does a municipality need a court order in order to bust up an encampment?
So no, a municipality does not need a court order to just simply enforce its own rules on public property.
And that's what Waterloo said it was doing in this case.
That is, but I would say that people also have rights. So cities' powers are not limitless. People do have charter rights, and cities have to respect those charter rights. And that's how we keep ending back up in court. But cities do not need a court order. They could just choose to enforce these evictions on their own. They have faced a lot of pushback, though, Steve, over the last few years when they have tried to break up the encampments. So I would offer that likely Waterloo went to court to try to get a stamp from a court allowing them to enforce an encampment eviction.
Well, that was going to be my next question, because if you don't need to go to court to bust up an encampment, why bother going? Why did they go?
Exactly. Cities are facing a lot of pushback when they're violently clearing encampments. We saw mass protests in Toronto when John Tory tried to clear the encampments in 2021. And so cities are going to courts to get a stamp of approval, but we saw that backfire in the case of the region of Waterloo, where not only did the court deny the city the ability to enforce that encampment clearing, but in fact has told the region they can't enforce any encampment clearing until they address the lack of housing in the region. And now this case precedent applies across the province.
Waterloo Region's contention here was that the people in the encampment on, I guess it was Victoria Street that we're talking about here, that those folks were violating probably 8 different municipal bylaws, which gave them the political cover to make the moves that they did. Do you dispute that the encampment was in violation of 8 different bylaws?
In many ways in the region of Waterloo, that question is irrelevant because the court has found that it's unconstitutional to enforce those bylaws. I would ask if you or your viewers have ever tried to look through the lengthy bylaws that exist around the regulation of how you can use public property. There's rules around what times you can be in parks. There's rules around many permitting many permits are required for noise or gatherings or events. And I would say many of us have probably violated many of these bylaws on public land, because bylaws are not always enforced when they're being violated. The exception to this is if you're unhoused. When you're unhoused, I've been in encampments and in parks where you see police come every single hour to harass and to enforce bylaws against people who really have nowhere else to go. And these bylaws are being used as an excuse to search people's tents, to take people's belongings, potentially to arrest them and evict them from the encampment. But the legal reality is that you don't need to enforce a bylaw, and you don't need to enforce it in that way, even if the bylaw exists. And so I would push back and say that although a bylaw might exist and might be being breached, the city doesn't need to be enforcing them in this way. And also people have rights, and the enforcement of those bylaws need to be balanced with those rights.
I like when you push back incidentally. That makes for a sparkier conversation, so that's good. The region of Waterloo said it's costing them and their municipal ratepayers $80,000 a month to deal with this problem. Does that sound legit to you?
Yeah, I read the decision. The majority of the $80,000 is going for the cost of security personnel. And there was a big outcry in Toronto when Toronto sought a $1 million contract for security personnel. And I would urge viewers to understand that security are not there for the safety of encampment residents. They're often being ordered by cities not to intervene in encampments, but simply to stand on the barriers to try to deter people from living in encampments. So I would say, why spend public resources in this way?
Now, you said a little bit earlier that you think this decision, and you're not the only one to have said it, will have ripples across the province of Ontario for other people in other encampments in other municipalities. Do we know, in fact, that that's the case and that this is not just a one-off for Waterloo?
Well, we know that this law now applies across the province, and we now have a court decision in Ontario that says that people have a constitutional right to shelter outside if cities do not have available and accessible indoor housing options.
Because Kingston's about to go through this too, right? Kingston is a plan. I've got a statement here from the mayor, which I'm going to read in a second. They're planning to evict about 70 people who are living in an encampment on Montreal Street in Kingston, supposedly to take place next March. Let's do this. Sheldon, shall we here? Top of page 2, the quote from the mayor. In an emailed statement to CBC News, Kingston Mayor Brian Patterson said, "There are also some key differences to consider between the encampment situation in Waterloo region and the situation here in Kingston. The Waterloo ruling refers to an encampment site on a parking lot, while Kingston's is on public land and subject to different bylaws." Mayor Patterson adding the ruling, quote, "appears to impose a substantial new responsibility on municipalities without providing any of the necessary resources." Does he have a point when he says public land versus parking lot makes this a different story?
And first, I'd respectfully disagree with Mayor Patterson that there's a new responsibility put on cities. People had these rights before this encampment, before this ruling from the Waterloo decision, and this court was simply recognizing those rights that already existed. But I think it's true that there is a difference. This is a different factor to examine, whether it's a vacant parking lot or a public park. But the decision in Waterloo does not say that the decision only applies to vacant public land. It simply uses that as a factor. And I think to understand how courts will evaluate this, we need to understand how charter protections are balanced by our courts in Ontario. And so what we hear from Justice Valente is that people do have Section 7 rights.
The judge in the Waterloo case.
Yes, exactly.
Who wrote the decision for the Waterloo case.
Yes, so the judge in that case says that people clearly have Section 7 rights to live outside because it is the safest way for them to live. It is the only way to live with dignity by erecting a shelter, and that clearing people from an encampment will put them in more harm's way. So people have those rights whether they're on public property, which is in a park, or on public property in a vacant parking lot. But the balancing question is how to balance that with other government objectives and other people's rights.
Yes.
I think what we saw in Toronto is that there are ways for encampments to live so that people are also able to use that public space. And in fact, what we saw as people were coming out to defend evictions, that it was many neighbors in the neighborhoods who were coming out to support.
Okay, can I pick up on that?
Sure.
That's a key point to me because, I mean, let's face it, this is all now in the realm of politics. If you had a couple of tents here and a couple of tents there and a couple of tents on the other side of town, so that it was more spread out rather than having everybody in one encampment in one place as both, never mind that it's an eyesore, I mean, dangerous for the people living there, dangerous for the local residents as well. Do you think this would be less politically problematic and therefore we probably wouldn't be talking about it today?
I'm wondering why you think it's more dangerous for people to live in large encampments versus be isolated, often by themselves.
Well, because the police are coming after them.
Outside of the public eye. Okay, exactly. So it's dangerous because clearings are being enforced, because police are being sent in instead of support services. Because the reason people are living together, when I speak with encampment residents, is that there's a lot of safety to living collectively. It also allows support services to be centralized. It allows people to stay in one place, to be able to continue, hopefully on a pathway towards housing.
There's no safety living collectively if the police are going to be in there at the behest of, politicians and by law enforcement officers and so on, to break up the encampments. There's no safety there.
But the fact is police are breaking up people's tents even when they're living one by one. So there's people living alone in ravines who are being evicted from their tents. It is true.
Okay.
It is true.
I don't hear much about that. I hear much about this. I don't hear much about that.
I mean, I can tell you the story. The week before the Waterloo encampment clearing happened, I got a call from 3 encampment residents who were being evicted from a corner from Simcoe and Richmond in downtown Toronto. They were being, the police came in to evict them from their encampment. They said that they did have housing, an emergency shelter option if they left the corner. The city tweeted out that they were giving housing to people in order to remove them. Bulldozer came in, it destroyed all of people's belongings. They walked to the shelter did not have space for them. They stayed there all day outside of the shelter and the shelter never had room. That's the reality of what this homelessness approach looks like in a city like Toronto and cities like Waterloo. And it's happening whether you're in a large encampment or just a few tents on a corner.
I know I have been told by city officials in the past that there are spaces available, that people often prefer to live in encampments, even on a cold night outdoors, as opposed to in a city shelter because Shelters can be violent, they can be uncertain, you can get your stuff stolen, all of that kind of thing. Do you think those statements are accurate? Do you think there actually is shelter space available? It's just that people don't necessarily want to avail themselves of it?
No, even the city's own data right now is saying that there's 1,000 less shelter spots for the 10,000 people who are currently living outside in Toronto. We also have a lot of investigative reporting that's showing that in December, for example, CBC reported that 100 people are turned away every single night from Toronto shelters. So there isn't sufficient shelter. I think it's also important to understand the level of violence in the shelters that's leading people to feel safer on a night where it's -30 outside, living outside on the street. There's been a tripling in violence in Toronto shelters. People talk about rampant abuse, and people often are coming from traumatic and abusive situations, entering shelter spaces that are then very violent. There's also a problem where people sometimes are given one night in a shelter, but told that they have to leave all of their belongings to get that one night in the shelter. So they'll have to give up their tent, give up all of their other personal belongings that they're using to survive for a night that they'll then get kicked right back out at 6 a.m.
Bigger shelters may not be the solution. What's the solution in your view?
I wouldn't agree that bigger shelters aren't the solution. I think the issue is emergency shelters, where you just have one night in a shelter, is not a solution for people who are living outside and made to give up everything. So I think people have spoken to me about the fact that the hotel shelter program in Toronto, where people were given their own locked rooms, they had a level of privacy, they were given some support services, and given
that,
some.
though, haven't we?
So that's the problem. The city is trying to cut back on those, and definitely not building more, which is what we would need. The other obvious solution to the problem is actually addressing our lack of affordable housing crisis that doesn't just exist in Toronto. It exists across the province. And it's happening both because our governments are spending less and less money building public housing, but also because of the rampant commercialization of our rental housing so that even tenants can't afford to live in our cities.
That's Seema Atri. She is co-director of the Community Justice Collective, and we thank you for coming into TVO tonight and putting this on our radar screen. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Steve.
And that is the agenda for Monday, February 6, 2023. Tomorrow, we'll have a conversation about the evolving nature of the talk, namely that dreadful conversation Black parents need to have with their children about racism. I'm Steve Paikin. Thanks for watching TVO, for joining us online at tvo.org, and we'll see you again tomorrow.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.
The Agenda is always on. To catch up on conversations from this week or any week, visit our website, tvo.org/theagenda, or our YouTube page at youtube.com/theagenda. It's all there for whenever you want to watch.